Hello. Welcome to Yelling at Birds. Matt here. Happy to have you here. Today, the video in this episode 53 is a brief interview I had with Mayor Tim Kabat of La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was kind enough to give me a little bit of time in his schedule. It was, started and done before I even knew it. Obviously I like to kind of give interviews time, but he doesn't have a lot of it. So it was nice of him to sit down with me and discuss his motivations for being mayor, how that position has affected him in his life, and also, obviously the current pandemic, the current protests, and how the city of La Crosse is handling times of drastic change and potential change. Another topic in La Crosse is they just announced their operating budget of the year, and I believe that budget for the city is set, and he invited people to be a part of the process for the 2021 budget. I believe the next event or the next opportunity to voice your concerns and opinions come this Thursday at not at the city council chambers, but I believe they're doing their meetings online, and I'll be posting an email address where they've asked that citizens who wish to address the council or voice their concerns with the capital improvement program budget to email their concerns in, or there's a box outside of City Hall where you can voice your opinion. So, and I'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not the city's doing enough or not. I know it doesn't seem like a lot because they were already doing some of the things, and listening to black members of our community speak, hearing that they're not as afraid of the police department as they are of regular citizens of La Crosse. Obviously it doesn't seem like the urgency is there for our community with our law enforcement, but obviously if there's a systemic problem, it does involve every city, every community, every law enforcement agency. And whether or not the transparency and reporting is enough, I guess we'll see. That seems to be the line that we're taking right now. La Crosse PD posting their transparency page and also posting their policies, but that only does so much. So, yeah, that's about all I have. I'm sweaty today. Enjoy. We'll use it. Fuck it. Enjoy my interview with Mayor Tim Kabat. Thank you very much. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now. A couple of things probably on your mind. A little bit about me briefly. I started this podcast mainly to talk about, my journey, as I made my way through the JSS system, actually through recovery from alcoholism, and about my mental health process. And I think that in that there's a lot that relates to every other facet of life that we're going through.
And obviously, to you, by the way.
Thank you very much. It's an excellent program. I've attending SMART meetings and working with Kelsey down at JSS. It was very much needed. And pretty much the first step is being open, honest, and vulnerable with family members. And over a 10-year process of me making certain decisions, this was the first time I actually allowed myself to do that, and this is a part of that journey.
Good for you.
Thank you. But I'm here to talk to you about you and a few of the things that are going on. So for people outside of La Crosse that listen in and watch my videos, can you give me a kind of a brief, who are you, kind of a little bit about yourself?
I'll be very brief because
Sure.
it's mostly boring stuff, right? I don't know. My interest in public service, I think, is probably something that's been with me for quite a while. Nearly all of my adult years, and I attribute a chunk of that to how I was raised in the whole idea of just, trying to help people and leaving a place better than how you find it is something that resonates with me. And especially when I'm talking to younger citizens and school groups, um, folks want to know kind of the philosophies and things that guide you, and that's something that's just always been important to me. So I as far as just maybe more recent, just background, I decided to run for mayor. I was encouraged by family and friends. I mean, really not any kind of a unique story or situation. It was in politics, and especially with roles like this, a lot of it is just sort of timing and the situation, and being able uh, to seize those opportunities when they come up. So uh, for me, I was at the time working as the director for the La Crosse Downtown Main Street
Okay.
organization, which is really geared towards trying to improve downtown La Crosse. Not only the physical, the buildings and structures and businesses, but from the social and the people side of it as well. So I very
Sure.
much enjoyed that. And then with this opportunity to become mayor, uh, a lot of the same, just people and connections and partnerships. So, I can remember pretty distinctly just the night of, it was a December night, and there was a group of folks that were meeting, and they just called and reached out to me, and they encouraged me to run for mayor, because they just felt like, at that time and just what was going on in the city, they thought I could do the job. So
Sure.
I listened and ultimately made that decision, and have been blessed here to be the mayor for coming up now on the end of my second term. So I think just for me, the big thing of working to make a community better. My background is in urban and regional planning, and that's, there's a lot of good direct connections to what city planners do in trying to improve neighborhoods and try to improve cities, and how citizens enjoy those cities. So there's a lot of connections that way. So it's helped me to be, I think, pretty well prepared for the role as mayor.
I bet. I bet. Um, how did that? Tell me about the night you became the mayor. One day you're not the mayor, now you are. What kind of thoughts go through someone's head when you realize that this is the role that you're going to have?
Well, I don't think anybody is really totally prepared for that, just because of, even at a local level, even a community that's smaller or mid-sized like La Crosse is, the full-time role of mayor. I don't think anybody is totally prepared for that. So
Right.
the election night was a celebration, and just as the votes were coming in, and kind of watching all that was pretty remarkable. I was able to enjoy that with my family, my wife and my two children. And they were teenagers at the time. They're adults now, but it was a pretty special thing because, again, even at the local level, you work really hard on a campaign,
Mm-hmm.
and we did that. I felt very strongly about the direct citizen connections, and going door to door, and doing a lot of events and a lot of outreach. So it was a culmination of all that work, um, and that was very rewarding. And then you kind of realize then the next day, like, all right, well, now the real work begins, because you obviously run for office, and you have ideas and a vision of what you'd like to see accomplished, and there isn't necessarily you know um, a game plan for how to make that happen. You
Sure.
really have to, especially a role like mayor, your most powerful tool is just your voice and your ability to try to build consensus. Because with our forms here, the city councils have a lot of power, and so you've got to convince council members to realize and push for priorities and programs. And so that was a big part of that, kind of that next day of just thinking like, all right, well, so who do I start to really now make outreach to and build relationships, and in most cases I had relationships, but just how do you nurture those and be able to work together.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sure those relationships maybe change a little bit once your role kind of flips over to the mayoral role. Um, how do you feel? How do you feel that? Do you feel like the job itself has had a a big impact on you personally as a your thought processes and like kind of how you see running the city?
It has had a big impact. I mean, it is easily the most difficult job by far of what I've done in my life. And I mean, and primarily all for good, for good reasons and good challenges, because, as mayor, you are trying to make the place better for everyone. This year, 2020, has been particularly difficult, but that's, we're all experiencing that. We're all, and
Mm-hmm.
you feel for folks, especially that have been impacted, that are out of work or have, lost their jobs or are still just struggling with trying to, pick up the pieces for the economic downturn, especially that's been the result of COVID-19. So, and then obviously all of the challenges in dealing with systemic racism and that coming to a
Mm-hmm.
head with what happened to George Floyd, but really pointing out that this is more than just a policing issue. These are systematic and pervasive all throughout institutions and organizations and people. So I do think that the job has definitely changed me in a way that I'm probably I was always a pretty diplomatic person and really tried to be open minded, but the almost it's almost 7.5 years now on the job, and especially these last few months, it really I guess centers you on the aspects of listening and really trying to go into situations with an open mind and relying on good information, good whether it's medical or health or scientific data when it comes to things like a global pandemic, and then when it comes to issues of racism, listening to the people of color in our community, and especially those who feel very much marginalized and very much negatively impacted by systems and by government. So that I think that's if I didn't fully realize that before, it's really been hammered home here the last few months of just how important these relationships, and then these abilities to bring people together, what it really means.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to. I wanted to ask you about, where you get information from. You kind of spoke to a few of those things. Um, I mean, especially, well, COVID, came first, and obviously we saw the effects of that pretty quickly in La Crosse. And I think one of the bigger things that we face as a public is who are we getting our information from? Who do we believe? What do we feel? And obviously you're dealing with a lot of different emotions from a lot of different people and a lot of different information sources. So how do you kind of decipher, what's noise and what to listen to when you're making your decisions?
Well, you do try to rely on the folks that are basing their decisions and the information that they're sharing really on science and on the medical and the health data. And I realize, of course, that everything can be politicized and everything can be spun for a
Yeah.
political point of view. But when you're talking about things like uh, uh, a a health crisis, you realize and try to trust your departments of health and the CDC, and that's what we've done here. Everything from the federal level to the state level, and then obviously our local county health department, to listen and understand what they are telling, telling the community, telling businesses and citizens what they should and shouldn't be doing. And they kind of all readily admitted when some of this stuff was first happening, the information changes as they learn more, because we still
Mm-hmm.
don't know everything about the coronavirus, this form of it. So things do change, and I think that's where we get a little bit caught up sometimes with, as just people in general, like we're so quick to point out a flaw or point out a mistake or point out something that maybe has been different as a way to say that, well, I don't trust that source now, or that person is
Right.
in it just for politics, because these things do evolve, and we're all humans and trying to figure it out, and so people do make mistakes. So I think for us, when it comes to the COVID, are really trying to listen to what the health experts are telling us, and then a lot of it too is you combine that plus then with some of the common sense things when it's staying home. That's, I think people can generally understand that, and in March and April and in the beginning of May, people for the most part understood that and were doing that, and then it became more challenging when there was definitely a push and messaging about, well, we've got to get things reopened because of the economic impacts from being shut down. So that's primarily, and we've relied heavily on the county health department here in La Crosse, because at the city we do not have our own health department, we do not have our own health professionals, and so we rely very heavily on them to provide us with guidance and information about just what's going on in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, like, with the loss of business in La Crosse, we rely on that community so much to, for city funding for, obviously budget just came out, and it's tough how do you plan for a deficit that, we're potentially facing, or we are facing?
Right. Right.
How do you do it?
Right. Well, I mean, it really was it came out of nowhere. I mean, we've never, I don't think, and I haven't done like all of the long history, like what happened back in 1918 to 1919 to the city, and when we had the Great Depression and some of those things, because those would be probably comparable situations. But here, we tell folks back in November of last year when we finalized the budget for 2020, we had provide the highest level of resources to the libraries, the highest level of resources to parks and recreation. We've expanded programs as a part of our neighborhood efforts. We have been doing all of those things all along, but we've been able to build over time because of how critical and vital those services are to our overall quality of life and what it means to live here in La Crosse. People love their parks, they love their trails, they love the library, and rightly so, because we have such a high level of service. Then you fast forward to March of this year, when the global pandemic hit us here, and on March 17th when things were shut down, and you quickly realize that the lack of economic activity was going to have some major impacts to city budgets, because we have we're kind of caught in a catch-22, because our budgets here in Wisconsin at the local level, I mean, first off, we've got to balance our budget, unlike some other levels of government that don't have to. But then we're reliant primarily on property taxes, and property taxes are not necessarily a great way to fund services, because they're not the most equitable, and you're putting a lot of responsibility on people that own property. So over time, the city has been really trying to diversify where we get our funding from, things like room taxes and that kind of economic activity. Well, you got, a global pandemic that shuts down your hotels and restaurants and where you get room taxes from, and you quickly realize that that whole source of revenue is pretty much dried up. So that happened very quickly. We have we have to take very decisive action to address the budget shortfalls this year, and unfortunately, we had to do some dramatic cuts to some of those quality of life departments that I talked about. And I don't blame anyone for being upset with the cuts that we've done to any of those programs. What I've tried to pledge to our citizens is that our budget process for 2021 starts very soon, and we're going to be doing everything we can to try to, if not restore cuts, figure out ways that we can go back to some of those service levels, maybe in different ways, but to really work on that aspect of it. So so going forward, the challenge we're going to face, of course, is our budget is relying on property taxes, shared revenue from the state of Wisconsin, and then, the economic activity. It's anybody's guess when we'll get back to a more regular economic activity, because as we're seeing right now, of course, we've had a high number of cases. We see bars and restaurants shutting down as precautions, and that's going to just further this economic malaise that we're in. So
Hmm.
um, so we're gonna do the best we can. It's going to be a challenge and a struggle, but I know that with the citizen input that we get, we're still committed to our priorities for our neighborhoods, and we're going to do everything we can to fund those priorities.
Sure, sure. Now the switching to the other big topic that you that we're dealing with now. Um, it what's happening now, I kind of relate to addiction recovery in a way, because we have our Black community, our Indigenous and people of color community telling us we have a problem. Um,
Yes.
and they're telling us we have a problem, and now it's up to us. We can't rely on them to tell us what. We have to take charge in our own recovery, uh, in order to make their quality of life better. So I see that we've done some, started to do some in the Eight Can't Wait. Um,
Right.
the Crosse police have come out with a transparency page. They posted their policies. Um, what else are we doing as a community to help support our people of color and make sure that their quality of life can improve in La Crosse?
Well, so a couple of areas of focus. I think when we're talking about policing, we had a meeting this week with the county government, and they have a body that's called the Criminal Justice Management Council, that's made up of really all aspects of the criminal justice system, the policing, the sheriff, the public defenders, and district attorneys and judges. I mean, so they're all represented, including citizens. And we talked about these various issues. One of the things that I've heard from attending the marches and hearing from protesters and our citizens here, our Black, Indigenous, and people of color here in La Crosse area, is transparency has been mentioned a lot, which I think is very important. People want to know, what a community's priorities are, how they work towards those priorities, and then they also want to be involved and participating actively in those decisions. So I think that's really important. And then the other part of it is to have that connection between institutions and our citizens. So whether it's a citizen advisory board or some sort of a mechanism where the where policing, especially right now, can answer to, can share information, but then also can uh, seek the advice, can make changes and make improvements based on what the citizens are telling us. I think that's all connected. So the Criminal Justice Management Council talked about that today, or this week, I should say, in forming some advisory committees that can start to look at that and actually develop more specific action steps. Because I think
Right.
they've heard the rhetoric, they've heard the slogans, they've heard the words, and now it's really time to see action. So that's what I'm most excited about, because I do think that going into this next phase of taking actions and being deliberate, I know that we've got kind of this balance and challenge of we want to take actions. People want government to be responsive, and I'm all for that. But we also want to take the right steps and make sure that we're being thoughtful and not necessarily just acting quickly for the sake of acting quickly. So that was discussed this week. I think quite a bit of good input and ideas for forming some citizens input and advisory board on policing. Here in Wisconsin, of course, we have our Police and Fire Commission, which is the city oversight of our police and firefighters. They do the hiring and firing and promoting and discipline. So
Mm-hmm.
there's some linkages there that we want to work through, and we've got to think through how that relationship is going to be best for kind of all parties involved. And then I think more broadly, when we're looking at, again, outside of just policing, it's again these other issues, the housing issues, the job opportunities, the quality of life issues. I mean, here in our city government, we've had a goal of neighborhood revitalization now for the 7+ years I've been mayor, and we've had a very comprehensive program. So funding affordable housing, funding investments in our neighborhoods, whether it's parks or pedestrian safety lighting or new trails, expanding transit service, expanding library service. Doing those things has been all an effort to not only improve lacrosse for the white residents, but for all people, for our Black, Indigenous, and people of color
Absolutely.
as well. So that's something that we're going to continue. I think what we really need to do, and we've got our own city human rights commission. We've had some conversations with them about how do we. I mean, these are some very good opportunities to gather input and feedback from our citizens and our community, but it's also opportunities to educate so that people can understand government processes and committees, and where are the times where people can offer that influence and that input, and coming up with better ways to do that, because not everybody wants to go to city hall, or not everybody wants to attend a committee meeting. They want to figure out other ways that we can more actively and more effectively engage our citizens. So those are all things that are in the works really within the last few weeks here, ever
Okay.
since the murder of George Floyd, and then how we're all trying to work together going forward.
Yeah. And of course, if obviously a citizen wants something to change, we can't do that unless they're engaged, and they're not going to be engaged unless they know how to be
That's
engaged.
right.
So I think that's
That's
important.
right. Yeah, I mean that part of that responsibility is definitely on the city government, and doing things to make our processes, our systems, again, more transparent, more accountable, more available. And it's also part of being a citizen and knowing, okay, if I want to do this or want to offer input or make a change, there's responsibility as citizens to do that as well. Because this is another thing I tell our young citizens and school groups and whatnot, that our quality of life here in lacrosse and at the local level is not just a spectator sport. It's really meant to be as a full participant, and that's important for our citizens to know that we're only going to get this way together by putting in the hard work.
Sure.
Again, we don't expect everybody to attend 100 committee meetings to make that happen. There's got to be other ways to do that, but we really all have this shared responsibility as citizens to work together.
Absolutely. And from what I've seen and what I've been, attended and been a part of, I do know that lacrosse has some amazing groups of people that are committed to taking action on their own to making sure the quality of life is improved in the city. I mean, we're in a lacrosse soup shirt right now. I mean, the Beer by Bike, League of the Ridiculous, various groups are doing a really amazing job. I know we're running
I
out
would
of.
agree.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to interject. I would
Yeah,
agree.
absolutely.
We're very blessed here in lacrosse with so many of those the groups that you mentioned, plus so many more. That
Hmm.
is, for a community our size, the level of involvement, of volunteerism, of philanthropy, of engagement is really remarkable. And so we've got such a good and strong foundation to build upon, that this is one of the things that does excite me going forward.
Absolutely. And I know we're running out of the time that we have here today, but I just want to know, how are you? How are you doing in all of this? I know a lot falls on your shoulders as the leader of the city. How does this weigh on you, and how do you go about getting yourself ready day by day to kind of face all these challenges?
Well, I'm doing fine. I appreciate you asking. I think the big challenge is really just the struggles at times when you do see a public health crisis going on, and like we've been witnessing the last few days, the case numbers going up, and people maybe not necessarily taking it as seriously as they should be. You try and try and try to use your voice and talk to people and communicate with the public about the things that we all should be doing. You know it doesn't always work though, and people don't always hear those voices. So I think that's probably just the bigger struggle, is knowing uh, the impacts. And unfortunately for all of us right now, I mean, we're all dealing with three major sort of, generational shifts, changes, whatever you want to call them, with a public health crisis, an economic downturn, and racial issues that have been too long neglected, all coming to a head at the
Right.
same time. So I think we're, as I had said earlier, we're just blessed with a lot of great people in this community and a great organizations. And so the mayor doesn't really have to uh, do everything. You lend your voice and your support wherever you can, and try to be a good example for our citizens. And the biggest issues for me, of course, is when you're hearing from citizens who, they feel a sense of, there's uncertainty, there's even maybe like not feeling safe. um,
Sure.
those are the areas, those are the times when being mayor, it really gets to you, because you would like to think in our community that people feel safe and engaged, but that's not the case. That's not the reality. So that's where the challenge, and that's where every day I try to to work on that, because we want changes here in La Crosse. And I'm you know I'm part of that, and working hard to get those things addressed. I mean, that's something that I'm sure we all feel at times, like, what more can I do? Or
Right.
how can I what's the best way to participate? So so that's what we try to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially like when we're being asked to participate in something that another section of our citizens have been dealing with their entire lives. And I
Right.
think it's like the least we can, like the absolute least we can do is start, if we haven't been already, start participating in it.
Yeah, and I
In the
think, I
changes
mean,
needed.
some of the speakers at the one of the protests that I was at, I mean, they were really trying to encourage, especially us, white citizens here, that the listening and really just trying to understand versus trying to necessarily always come up with solutions, or
Sure.
coming up with a response, is very important. And then to realize that this that racism is happening, it's everywhere, it's just different for people. Um, so I think that's the big part of it, is realizing that there's so many things that have been going on for a long time, and that my role as mayor really is one that tries to help facilitate solutions and bringing people together. So that's the challenge that I accept, is what can I be doing differently as the mayor to get our Black, Indigenous, and people of color here in our community engaged and productive when it comes to making changes to city government and city institutions. Because like I said earlier, it's beyond just like, okay, we're going to hold a committee meeting, and people can show up, and if you
Right.
don't show up, you kind of miss the boat. We really need to work and think differently about that.
Absolutely. Well, Mayor Tim Cabot, I think we're at our time. I really appreciate
Thank you, Matt.
you taking the time to talk with me today. Kaylee would also want me to remind you to hit record again before we leave today
I will. I
to
will do
stop the
that. And then
recording.
she's got, yep, that's good. I appreciate that, Matt. And she'll be sending you the link for the recording. So if all goes well, we should have this to you by either later today or tomorrow.
That sounds absolutely perfect. I really appreciate your time.
Okay, you bet. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank
Take
you.
care.